He says, I have a question regarding sleep, or rather the lack thereof. As we all know, typically the night before a race is filled with nerves, and many of us, including myself, have trouble sleeping. I'm in the same boat too. Before a race, terrible sleep, right? Therefore, we often enter a race with less than optimal sleep. So my question is whether or not working with less than optimal sleep is trainable. For example, I'm a triathlete who often does brick workouts on Saturdays, trying to mimic race day as much as possible with my nutrition, transition, etc. Is it worthwhile to also practice these workouts with a bit less sleep than normal? Or is this only hurting myself? Does getting a shorter night's rest before one of these race simulation workouts improve my ability to race on little sleep? Or is it only harming my recovery and worsening the workout? As always, thanks for the great content from Steven. This is like, I've thought of this question before too. When I'm up really early, like for Leadville is a great example of this, and we'll probably refer to Leadville a couple of times throughout answering this question, but that one's really tough because you either have to stay, I mean, it starts really early anyway, but then you have to stay. Leadville is limited and tough to stay in. So then you might have to drive to different areas. Chad, when you supported me when we were doing it, we stayed down in Golden, Colorado, and then drove all the way up in the morning. So we had to get up super early for that. So yeah, this is a common question that I could see people having. Chad, you have the bulk of this one. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. So initially I read this and I thought it's kind of a knee-jerk response was that, no, that's not going to be helpful. But the more I thought about it, the more I came around to the position that this really is a fair question, because simply exposing ourselves to any stressor can reduce the negative impact. I mean, if you think of, as an example, heat and familiarization to heat. I mean, even before any physiological adaptations have taken place, you can actually improve your performance. Go out on a hot day and the first time it really unnerves you and it holds you back. There's this mental restriction, this leash. But then you ride a couple more days, physiologically, not much has happened, but you ride a little bit better, that you start to loosen that leash or extend it, however you want to see it. So, I kind of moved forward with that. And then it came to me that Keegan has said, so friend of the podcast, Keegan Swenson has said on a number of occasions, or it's been noted that he says he doesn't believe in altitude. And I thought, well, I couldn't wrap my brain around that because he doesn't let altitude limit him. So I'm like, is there a familiarity aspect to it? There can't be. I mean, psychologically, there can't be, but physiologically, absolutely. I mean, if you recall, when we've talked about altitude acclimation, most studies cite that sweet spot being between 2,000 and 2,500 meters. For us in the Western Hemisphere here, it's between 67 and 8,300 feet, right? Keegan lives in Park City. Anybody want to look up what the altitude or the elevation is there? You don't have to, because I've got it right here. 7,100 feet, 2,200 meters. He lives in that sweet spot. I mean, it's about as ideal as it gets. So there's probably a reason that he doesn't believe in altitude, because he exists at altitude.
I got to clarify this. It is a joke. And what he's trying to say is he doesn't want to have it hold himself back mentally. I think that's your point.
Yes,
where he goes up, and some people get super scared of altitude. And he just goes, I don't believe in it. But we look at his power numbers at different altitude.
He's not a flat earther. Yeah, he's not a flat earther.
No, but his power at sea level versus 10,000 feet at Telluride, completely different. Mm-hmm, and we actually did adjustments. And I think, anyways. So it's more of a joke. But the thing about the mental aspect, that is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. No one is surprised that Nate is comparing sea level to altitude. I'm just going to put that out
there. We're hitting bingo cards pretty fast here already in the first question. But your point is super. Yeah, exactly. Your point's super valid though, Chad. I like it in the sense that sometimes we think that it's just an old question. But if you look at it, especially in this case, if you're used to something, there is an initial effect far beyond or before physiological effects or adaptations even take place.
I mean, think about it. If you're worried that one poor night's sleep is really going to affect your race performance the next day, then you enter into that race performance the next day with that mindset. But if you've done it enough times to recognize, I felt this way before, it's not that big a threat, I'll be fine. You'll probably be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the more scientific end of things, let's first start by acknowledging that there are differing consequences of insufficient sleep. And specifically, I'm talking about the difference between acutely, or, a night or a couple of nights before a race or workout, versus chronically, which, is usually on the order of a couple of weeks. So acutely, pre-race sleep sucks, and that's okay. And it's pretty consistent. A study, we're looking at 3 decades ago, Van Helder and Radomski, did a review, and they restricted sleep for anywhere from 30 to 60 hours. Well, they looked at studies that restricted sleep between 30 and 60 hours prior to whatever. And they noted that the negatives were limited to time to exhaustion and rating of perceived exertion. In other words, we're talking mental limitations here, not physiological limitations. And bear with me, I want to read a pretty long quote because it sums this up nicely. Although ratings of perceived exertion always increase during exercise and sleep deprived, we're talking 30 to 60 hours, subjects compared with normal sleep, this is not a reliable assessment of a subject's ability to perform physical work, as the ratings of perceived exertion are dissociated from any cardiovascular changes in sleep deprivation. So put simply, we suffer psychologically, but physiologically and physically, we're still capable.
So this is kind of why, Chad, you've mentioned, Nate, and I don't know, all of us, we've talked about this before, where if you have to get up early for a race and people really fret about that, or they fret about the night's sleep just before an event. And we've told people that shouldn't be your main area of concern, or better said, a poor night's sleep before the race doesn't mean that your FTP drops from 150 to 100, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's I think an important thing for people to understand. Amber, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that too.
Yeah. I just wanted to share, this is pure anecdote, no science to back this up whatsoever. But when I was racing, we kind of had this saying that the night of sleep, the sleep you get the night before the race is really pretty inconsequential. What matters more is 2 nights before the race. I don't know if that's actually true. So huge grain of salt on that one. But I would say that probably the most important thing is how much sleep you get on a regular basis. So what are your general sleep habits? And while I don't have any science to back this up, what I can say is reducing your stress around sleep really helps. And so if you just don't stress about that night of sleep before an event, that's probably going to do you a lot more good, because the stress itself is going to have an impact. So if you can just let go of that, that's already a win. And then if you believe that it's not going to impact your performance, there's also the benefit of placebo. So get rid of one negative impact, add a positive one, and it's probably going to be good.
Amber, you just jinxed it though. It was now 2 nights before. I'm going to be like, this is the important night. This is like I have to sleep. Thanks, Amber. You got to be like, it's like 4 weeks. There's like this one window that you have to hit. Chrissy Wellington, who is probably one of the most successful Ironman athletes of all time, she would say she would not sleep a wink before an Ironman World Champs. So nervous. And then she'd go and win an Ironman, right? Think about how much energy you have to have.
For those of us here that have like been to Kona, like even just the energy on that island the night before the race, oh my gosh, like I'm not even racing, right? And I can feel like the nerves and everything else. Like it's really hard. But Amber, you make a great point about, I think of my son. He lays there in bed and I come inside and I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, I just can't sleep and I'm worried I won't be able to sleep. And then I'm like, well, you know, worrying about it makes it worse. Right. So, but we do that all the time with a race. That's a really good point, that I need to remove the anxiety from like my anticipation and fear of not sleeping. I just need to remove that entirely from it. Then I'm probably, right. Even if it doesn't end up changing my sleep quality, at the very least, it just removes some anxiety and allows me to be more relaxed.
And I don't have any science to back this up, Amber. Well, actually I do. But the, for what I think is because it does increase your RPE, but for working out to reduce that RPE, caffeine, like it kind of levels that. So it's not good long-term health or anything like that. But just for that one race for working out, I'm like, I'm taking caffeine. It's not going to be a huge deal. I'm going to be my arousal state's going to be so high because of the race. And it's, you know, how many times has this happened to you all? I mean, it's got to be over 100 times, I bet, for myself, where I've had a bad night's sleep before a race and then I've raced great. Like
100 times a year right here.
100, exactly, right? So for everyone else who's doing it, be like, it happens to Amber all the time and she was a pro and had it just fine. So
that's a good point though, Nate. I mean, caffeine is an acute solution to an acute challenge. So we can just handle it in the moment. I mean, we're not recommending that you train that way, clearly not, but you know, in a pinch, that's an absolutely viable way to go. So very much along the lines of in which we're speaking right now, there was a study roughly a year ago where the aim was to assess the impact of early morning training on the sleep the night before in elite swimmers. And what they noted was that there was a difference in the pre-training nights versus the pre-rest nights. Pre-training, they'd sleep on the order of about 5 hours, whereas if they were heading into a rest day, they would sleep more along the lines of 7 hours. Point being is that anxiety prior to a hard training session was similar to the anxiety they faced prior to an actual event. So in effect, Stephen, you might already be exposing yourself to this challenge, simply getting worked up knowing that I got a really tough workout the next day. Okay, so now that was more along the lines of acute sleep restriction. Now let's look at the effects of chronic sleep restriction, because this is Amber's already alluded to this. We've touched on this. Changes when you carry this out over days. And typically when we talk about chronic sleep restriction, the research leans towards about 14 days. So roughly 2 weeks, and they're looking at under 6 hours of sleep a night. And what they've noted, a number of studies have noted, is it carries both psychological and physiological consequences in this case. And in particular, I'll name a couple of the effects. Chronic sleep restriction pulls really hard on our immune systems. They measure this, they see increases in pro-inflammatory cytokines. And basically, my point being is that we're setting ourselves up for illness when we face sleep restriction on a routine basis. They also note things like reductions in your growth hormone, which is going to have a direct impact on your ability to recover. And psychologically, just consider the importance of mood, especially during things like high intensity training, or what about sweet spot training, when you have to sit at a really uncomfortable effort level for long periods of time. So my takeaway here is that RPE and sleep quantity and quality go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Chad, I don't want to take you too far off track on this, and maybe we don't have the way to answer this. So maybe this just feeds into another question, and I'm probably just going to upset people. I apologize, but this makes me question the fact, because there are a lot of people that talk about training early in the mornings, and they're like, so I just have to do it, and I don't get to bed until 9 or 10 o'clock because, insert many valid reasons. But then I have to get my training. I have to be on the bike at 5 a.m. and then I have to do this. So they're, fitting in somewhere around 5 to 6 hours of sleep on a chronic level. Yeah. Is this also like, this is a tricky point where a lot of athletes think I need to get the training in, but they do so at the expense of sleep. Personally speaking, I don't think I'm tough enough. I don't know. But when I try to get up super early and do my early morning workouts, I end up having a long tail effect that ends up compounding. And then like fast forward 2 weeks to a month, and I am completely exhausted. I'm getting sick. Everything in my life is suffering because I'm taking that sleep time and dedicating it to training. So I guess my question is like, should this be of concern for people that are doing that very thing, sacrificing sleep time to train early in the morning too?
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of things to consider there. First of which is, can you adjust your sleep schedule? Because you have to, for a number of reasons, not just to benefit your training, but to benefit your lifestyle and your well-being. But also this kind of shifts the emphasis toward quality, away from quantity and more toward quality. Because people talk about sleep quantity. I sleep 10 hours every night. Well, you don't. You might be in bed for 10 hours every night, but I guarantee you're not getting shut-eye for those entire 10 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours, which, maybe if you get down to someone who is sleeping under 6 hours a night, but they're getting high quality sleep for those 6 hours, and I don't know how likely that is, but let's pretend it can happen, then those people are probably getting more quality out of their sleep than someone who tosses and turns for 8 hours or 10 hours. So no hard answer there, but
sure,
there's long term, all the science points to at least 6 hours, and most of it points towards at least 7 hours of sleep at night. And that's at a minimum for people. We're not even talking about athletes in that case. So when we bump it up to the demands that we place on athletic bodies, people who train consistently, endurance train, strength train, all that, I gotta believe more than 7 hours is necessary for people like that.
Thanks, Chad, for answering that. I'm sure somebody listening to that in this situation was just asking that question. So thanks for addressing it.
Okay, so we talked acute, we talked chronic. So now let's see where there are commonalities between the two. First of which, a lot of science or a lot of research points to the fact that we see certain impairments. One of them is in our cognitive capacity. One of them is in our ability to metabolize glucose, certainly important for endurance athletes. Appetite regulation. I mean, how much more difficult is it to resist that donut in the morning off of a poor night's sleep? Increase in insulin resistance, impaired ability to replenish your glycogen stores. I mean, these are all things that are highly relevant to endurance athletes. So point being here is that short term, probably don't need to worry too much about this, but longer term, sleep restriction can have lasting effects on more than just your performance. So you got to see it outside of just that narrow scope. It's going to affect your life in more bigger ways. And then secondly, my takeaway would also be that, and this is widely shared in the research, is that sacrificing sleep to train can actually negate some, if not most of the training benefits. And one study that backs this up to an extent was just done last year. Sainer and Bartlett looked at sleep restriction, and they compared people who sleep, they limited to 4 hours a night versus 8 hours a night, carried this over 5 nights. And what they noted of significance, noted in a number of things, but what I homed in on was that there were significantly lower rates of muscle protein synthesis. But they also noted that they could maintain the rates of protein synthesis with the introduction of high intensity exercise. So, basically high intensity intervals. So a couple points here. First, acute sleep deprivation might impact our ability to grow new muscle. That's of concern. And secondly, I'm not saying that high intensity interval training is a panacea for all of the detrimental effects of sleep restriction. So they looked at muscle protein synthesis with sleep restriction over only 5 days. Extend that out longer, maybe there's a greater impact on muscle protein synthesis. And while the high intensity training may have covered it in that very short term 5-day span, who knows if it would happen? Not to mention, you're sleeping poorly. The last thing we're going to recommend is that you do high intensity training every day to compensate. Makes no sense at all.
Like a death spiral, right? I'm feeling tired. 6 by 20. It's like
let's pick the hardest workout we can do and pick a body that's not getting enough regeneration over the course of a night.
Yeah, that'd be rough.
Okay, cool. So now let's briefly consider technicality. So a study a few years back by Fullagar was a systematic review where they looked at a reduction in sleep quantity and quality and how it could result in autonomic nervous system imbalance and simulate symptoms of overtraining symptoms. They looked at increases in inflammation, decreases in immune system function, things we've already pretty much touched on, but they also noted a decline in cognition. So the link here between greater cognitive demand of the event and greater performance impact of that sleep loss. So psychologically and mentally, we have to consider the differences in our events. I mean, if you compare a criterium, and initially I was going to say a time trial, but then I thought, no, a time trial requires a whole lot of cognitive input. I mean, you have to manage pain for long periods of time, high level pain, basically your breaking point, and just stay just below it, right? So rather than compare those two, how about a crit or a time trial versus something like a non-competitive Grand Fondo, where, you're not out there to do anything except enjoy your day, ride your bike, hit aid stations, chat with your friends. I mean, it's very different. There's not a high cognitive demand in that case. But something like a criterium where you're lining up with 80, 90, 100 other athletes on a tighter technical course, you need to be sharp.
Yeah, definitely. And this just to me, this goes back to why it's so important to just build good habits over time, because it's going to help everything on a daily basis. Agreed,
completely. Okay, so one more systematic review. This was just a couple of years ago. It whittled down to 19 studies across 12 sports, and they looked at the impact of sleep duration on performance in competitive athletes. So I'm just going to hit you with the takeaways here. First off, sports requiring speed, tactical strategy, or technical skill were the most sensitive to reductions in sleep duration. Longer term sleep manipulations were more likely to affect athletic performance. So again, we're talking about habitual, not just acute or short term. And then no studies reported a negative association between sleep duration and outcome, which is basically saying that an increase in sleep duration was either positive or at worst had a neutral effect on performance. So put it another way, sufficient sleep at worst has no effect or conveys benefits to performance. And then an important author takeaway was that though physiological findings are mixed, you probably don't need to worry about a span as short as 1 to 3 nights. And my personal takeaway, however, was what about the sleep quality, the habits, the quantity that you carried into that? Because 1 to 3 nights is different when it's on the heels of a few nights of poor sleep or just general bad sleep habits or general insufficiency of sleep duration or quality.
Right.
And then I'll close with go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you have good sleep habits most of the time, it's sort of, you're building resiliency into the system for when things go wrong. So if you have a particularly stressful week or something where your sleep is a little bit derailed, it's going to impact you less if most of the time on a regular basis, you're getting really, really good sleep. So getting the good sleep isn't just about performing well in your workouts day to day. It's also about building resiliency into the whole system.
Yeah, super good point. Okay, so close with 2 overarching take homes is 1, don't intentionally sacrifice your sleep. And 2, don't worry too much about any short-term or acute sleep alterations.
So what I really want on this is to pull in the sleep tracking data for AT and then correlate that with survey responses to what we predict your your RPE would be on a hard workout to what it actually is, based on just what you said, the short-term, mid-term, long-term sleep deprivation. See if there's a correlation between performance improvements versus people who are sleeping 5 hours all the time or 9 hours all the time, and then timed with time of day, as John said, because we know that stuff too, and try to tease all those things out, because that would be super interesting if we can predict that John gets faster if he trains at 2 p.m. rather than 5 a.m., or people in general. There'd have to be a strong enough signal for that to happen, but who knows? So if you have sleep trackers, please wear them. The quality of the sleep trackers, I don't think do a good job. I've probably talked ad nauseum on this podcast about my own sleep issues with sleep apnea and that sort of stuff. The sleep trackers are like, yeah, you're amazing sleep. I mean, and I'm like, I go into an actual laboratory and it's like, yeah, you're choking, your pulse ox is 80 and it's crazy. And then now sometimes too, I'll have my CPAP on, great night's sleep, no sleep apnea. You move around a little bit. And then I've also worn 2 sleep trackers at the same time. And one sleep tracker, I went to the bathroom. One sleep tracker got that. Another sleep tracker didn't even notice that I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, that I slept all the way through. And this is a popular one that many people talk about. And
Yes.
I messaged them and they're like, hey, we don't record movement that's shorter than this many minutes. And I'm like, but I got up. Anyways, I would not judge your quality, or if you see your quality is bad based on a sleep tracker, I wouldn't just affirm it either way, like that it's good or bad.
I don't know about anybody, but like looking at this, I'm thinking about Cape Epic, about the sleeping during that race, because it's probably going to be, so it's getting squeezed on both sides, right? In the sense that you have an immense amount of fatigue and everything else. And like, yes, when you're tired, you sleep well sometimes, but there's a difference between like being completely blown out from a really hard ride. And then when you also know that you have to do that again the next day, like I said, it's kind of pushing on sleep from both ends, right? And making it kind of tough.
Well, Amber can probably speak to the idea that when you're sympathetically all wound up, you don't get good sleep. And as that accumulates from night to night to night over a long stage race, something I've never done, but I'm sure Amber has, I can't imagine your sleep improves over the course of a 7-day stage race.
I would say early in my career that was the case, but later in my career, I think I got better at shifting back into a parasympathetic state after a sympathetic state. And I do think that that's something that you can improve with time and with some effort. And so I was able to get to a point where early in the stage race, it would be harder to sleep because you have all those nerves of anticipation. But as soon as you sort of settle into, okay, the GC is somewhat established, the players you need to look for, there are fewer unknowns, and you're really tired, then for me, it actually got a lot easier to sleep. But there was a big difference between the beginning of my career and the end of the career. And I think that had to do with just some experience and my body just getting used to saying, okay, it's okay to go back into parasympathetic mode now, because we've been here before. So it was really interesting. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Caffeine timing too on Cape Epic over a stage race. You gotta because if you do it at the end of the stage, you're totally impacted. And if you do too much, because it's the half-life, right? So you can't just say there's a rule of thumb like no caffeine afternoon or something. But if you're doing double the caffeine, like at noon, it's like still like you took caffeine at noon based on double the half-life. You can do the math, but I'm not going to be doing 400 milligrams of caffeine each day. Maybe on the last day, but maybe 200 at like 7 a.m. and that's it. Or maybe some emergency on a really bad day. But it is huge, and I've thought about this a lot of just getting back to the hotel too, right? Because Amber said is getting that parasympathetic state is extremely important. And yes, I'm not sleeping in a tent. That sounds miserable for Cape Epic. Plus, my CPAP wouldn't work.
I just realized I didn't verify that. Am I going to be sleeping in a tent? Or Brandon and I sleeping?
Just you guys.
I think you're in a tent. Chad, I think you're in a tent too. When did you sign up for it?
Hard no. Oh, seriously? This is real? You're not messing with me?
I don't know. Did you sign up for it?
That's a deal breaker. Seriously, I'm not sleeping in a tent and subjecting myself to that.
All right, Brandon, if you're watching this right now, can you start looking for hotels and then we'll figure this out because
we'll figure it out.
Tent's going to be kind of rough.
You guys have to sign up for it yourselves.
Brandon, please look into
No,
that
Pete
right
said
now.
he signed up for it. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank God.
Brandon, please work on the AT release. We can figure this stuff out later. We'll hire a helper. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. If we don't have that, we'll figure out places for you to stay. It'll all be great, Chad.
Thank goodness. Yeah. I could see Chad just doing a hard nope on that one. So
Hard nope.
I'd be right with you, Chad.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.
If you think I have better hair than Jonathan, give it a thumbs up. If not, leave a comment.
My hair is better than his.